The process of applied functional science is the transformation of the notion into the motion.
From Gray Institute, I'm Barb, and this is the Gray Institute podcast. Gray Institute is internationally acclaimed for its innovation, development, mastery, and delivery of applied functional science. AFS is based on scientific truth, not theory, on how the human body moves in all three planes. AFS allows movement professionals like you to apply the best, most effective, and most efficient movements to any individual based on specific needs and goals. For 40 years, through training, education, and mentorship, Gray Institute has equipped over 150,000 professionals with comprehensive knowledge in the principles of applied functional science. Whether you're a physical therapist, personal trainer, athletic trainer, chiropractor, strength and conditioning coach, physician, physiotherapist, occupational therapist, osteopath, physical therapy assistant, or kinesiologist, our goal is to help you become the go-to movement professional. The Gray Institute podcast is questions-based. You send in your questions and we discuss them. We join Gary as he discusses optimal body movement and function for our clients. If you're listening and have a question, email them to info@grayinstitute.com.
From Gray Institute, I'm Gary Gray, and this is the Gray Institute podcast. Welcome, everyone, to our ongoing series of podcasts. First of all, I want to tell you how much we appreciate your feedback, and especially your feedback associated with additional questions that will stimulate us to learn, but also give us an opportunity to share. During this special time of Thanksgiving, by the way, I'm sure is many of ours kind of favorite season, not expecting to have to give anything, not expecting to get anything, but just the expectation of being able to sit back a little bit and just being thankful. And so many things to be thankful for that I don't even want to start with the list, because the list would go on and on and on, and hopefully you'd get bored with the podcast of so many things that we all are thankful for. Just the ability to share with each other, and the opportunities we have as movement specialists to have people come into our midst and ask for our help, and we hopefully can give it our best shot. Today, we again have a twofer. A twofer means one person writes a question, but then they write two questions, and both of them really need to be answered. Both of them are perfect, and so therefore we're going to go twofer. Both of these questions are from Matthew Haley, and Matthew, I really appreciate these questions, and we'll get a really good insight to Matthew's understanding of human movement, which I think is exquisite, very good, just by his very first question. And then we'll go on to a second question. So let's just go ahead and get started, because this first one is a question near and dear to my heart. I'm going to just kind of read it as is. I'm looking for your thoughts around performing exercises with a patient with scoliosis. Do you encourage movement mainly in the pattern that goes opposite the curve to encourage new pattern in neuromuscular control and avoid moving in the already dysfunctional pattern? Or is there some value in moving in the old pattern, i.e. into the curve, so to speak, in all three planes to encourage good mobility even in that pattern? Wow, we got a big wow there. So let me first of all let you know that the answer to this question is going to be found in our Gray Institute YouTube channel for our gift program, the Gray Institute for Functional Transformation, our 40-week mentorship program. We put together a 6-part what we call PST process, the truth, the strategies, and the techniques associated with understanding and treating scoliosis. We no longer can hold this back just for the gift community. We need to get it out there and to share it with everyone. And therefore, besides me trying to verbally answer this, what I would consider extremely complex and three-dimensional question, feel free to go to our YouTube channel and go through those 6 videos that I think will give you some really good insight into our approach to treating scoliosis based on pure human function. One of the other resources I would strongly suggest that you get is a book by the name from Christina Leonard-Schroth. They call it the Schroth method of treating scoliosis. She wrote this book, I believe, back in 1972, before I even became a physical therapist. And strangely enough, I didn't know about this book until just a couple years ago when I was sharing our approach to scoliosis. Someone at a chain reaction seminar raised their hand and said, well, do you have this book? And I said, no. And they said, well, it sounds somewhat similar because she talks about a three-dimensional approach for scoliosis. And of course, as they know and as you all know, that's been our approach ever since we started trying to understand human movement, is a three-dimensional approach. So that's a wonderful resource. As I go through the book, which I have a number of times, there are some principles and strategies that we go amen to, and there's a few that we would say, not really sure about that one. And hopefully our better understanding of human function has allowed us to progress and to understand that even better, and hopefully it even progresses even more as more people are being able to take care of someone with scoliosis. Let me start answering the question. In chain reaction, when we talk about that, I'll normally set up a story and tell a story about how my daughter, at age 12, going on 13 and going on 26, so to speak, wanted to go to Florida with another family. And I thought that was a great idea during spring break until I saw the swimming suit that she had picked out, and told her that I wasn't really happy with the swimming suit. And the story goes on, and I embellish it quite a lot by indicating that my daughter gets upset, throws the swimming suit down, and when she goes down to pick it up, in her frustration of not having a father that understands and who doesn't trust her, I quickly see this posterior rib hump, and my heart sinks. And so I immediately look around, and everyone in chain reaction says, so who wants to treat my daughter? And then we get into, so what are we being taught in physical therapy school? And to my dismay, over the last 3 years in chain reaction, I have not yet had a physical therapist that says I have confidence in treating that. Theoretically, as being doctors of physical therapy, doctors of human movement, we should raise our hand very proudly and go, I'd like to shot at your daughter and see if I can help her. One person said, well, our professor told us that it's no use even learning anything about it because it can't be helped. I don't agree with that. And of course, they go to the evidence-based research, and the research that's out there says that if you do physical therapy exercises for someone with scoliosis, it's never been proven to improve, and we're not sure if it inhibits the curve, so we just sit back and watch it progress. What the research should say is non-functional, one-dimensional exercises without any consideration to all three planes of motion, and no consideration to the potential cause of scoliosis, and no consideration to forces that would ultimately result in the scoliosis, not taking consideration, those exercises don't seem to help scoliosis. We now have a number of case studies that the scoliosis that has been treated not only has been inhibited, but it has been significantly improved, even over 50 to 75%. We do not have any record of somebody having scoliosis and taking them back to what we would call a 0-degree frontal plane and 0-degree transverse plane. But hopefully this encourages us to kind of look at this closer and to understand scoliosis. So one of the very first questions I'll ask is, so is scoliosis a sagittal plane problem, a frontal plane problem, or a transverse plane problem? And of course, when we measure scoliosis, we measure the frontal plane deformity and we measure the rotational rib hump. But it's really a three-dimensional deformity that we have to take in consideration. Is it a neurological problem, a muscular problem, or a skeletal problem? Is it a neuromuscular skeletal problem, or is it just one of those? And of course, the answer is yes. It's got to be neurologically involved, it's got to be muscularly involved, and it's skeletally involved. Is it a problem relative to the muscles and mobility? Or is it strength and stability? Or is it endurance? And again, the answer all of a sudden becomes yes. Is this a top-down problem, a bottom-up problem, or a side-to-side problem? And the answer is yes. Is this a body problem, or is this a mind problem, or is this what we'd call an emotional and spiritual problem? And the answer is yes. So not knowing exactly what causes scoliosis, why all of a sudden somebody's spine decides to take off in a curve, we have to approach it in not only a three-dimensional way from each plane of motion, but three-dimensionally neuromuscular-skeletally, three-dimensionally as in mobility, stability, endurance, three-dimensional as in the top down, bottom up, and side to side, and forward to back, and also three-dimensionally as in mind, body, and spirit. We're dealing with the human being that's dealing with something that's scary and very frustrating. And again, in my embellished story, I indicate that after I explained to my daughter that she now can go to Florida and that her swimming suit is fine because that no longer bothers me, that we'll need to go to the doctor and get evaluated, my daughter immediately goes in and types in scoliosis in YouTube, and the very second video she sees is a surgery of a Harrington rod. And of course, that all of a sudden puts on the panic attack. When we go see the doctor does a great job doing a standing x-ray and measuring the curve, whether it's a C curve or an S curve, or sometimes we see even a four-part curve. But then says, you know what, we're just gonna observe this and see what happens. And if it gets worse, no big deal. We'll just throw a Harrington rod in there, but hopefully it doesn't get any worse. Well, there's no guarantee there. And of course, I as the father go, well, isn't there anything we can do about it? And of course, the doctor would say, research, quote unquote, says that it can't. Well, we haven't done the right research yet. And hopefully this will stimulate a lot of thoughts doing the right research. And there is a lot of evidence-based research and findings that have been out there since 1972 on taking a look at scoliosis more three-dimensionally, more 3D. So knowing that, there's a couple principles that we bring out in the video that I believe will help answer your question, Matthew. And the first thing we do is when we talk about creating mobility in all three planes of motion, we realize what we're going to do is we're going to have 4 points of attachment in a standing position because of the proprioceptive input and feedback, where we create a mobility the opposite of the direction of the curve. Now, scoliosis curves are what we call type 1. All that means is if I have a scoliosis, and we'll just start with a simple C curve, and I'm laterally flexed to the left where the concavity is on the left-hand side, the convexity is on the right-hand side, I will always have a posterior rib hump on the right-hand side, which means I'm rotated to the right. So laterally flexed left, rotated right. That's called a type 1 from osteopathic terminology curve. We also know that most of these curves have a big component of kyphosis. So there's a sagittal plane component, a frontal plane component, and a transverse plane component. So in order to make sure we're not stealing from Peter to pay Paul to mess up Mary, we have to create an environment, which we show in the YouTube videos, where we have to have the feet stable and the hands stable and create a driver with the pelvis and the head to facilitate mobility. So let's say we have a curve that, again, is laterally flexed to the left, concavity on the left, convexity on the right, right rotated, which is the posterior rib hump's right, and kyphotic. We need to position from a top-down posture, we need to position the hands where I get extension and I get lateral flexion to the right and I get rotation to the left, which is just the opposite. Now, this is the mobility approach. We have to create a new path, the path that we want to facilitate. We also need to do that bottom up. If we're just dealing with a C curve, bottom up, we have to position the feet to facilitate the bottom up reaction that we want to, again, quote unquote, correct the curve from the bottom up through mobility. Now, knowing that we have 4 points of attachment, right hand, right foot, left foot. We know now if we do the right positioning of the feet and the hands to create that new path of mobility opposite of what the curve is showing us, that the patient can't basically sneak out of the curve and cause the curve worse. So for example, if I just did a frontal plane, if I just tried to get this person to only do frontal plane reaction, literally what would happen, the path of least resistance of that particular patient's back would actually increase the right rotation. So it would bail out. And literally I would be causing ultimately a bigger curve. When the patient relaxed and went back to their normal relaxed state, that increased right rotation would facilitate an increased lateral flexion to the left. And even though my heart was in the right spot, I wasn't thinking three-dimensionally. So therefore, mobility has to be attacked three-dimensionally. Stability, on the other hand, is quite interesting, and I think this is the eureka moment that we had, is knowing that in order to overcome a problem, we have to, what we call in applied functional science, feed the deformity. And here's what that means. If I have somebody that's just simply kyphotic, let's say they don't have a scoliosis, but they do have a sagittal plane kyphosis, we would say we have to approach this three-dimensionally. But if we were going to create a reaction, let's say in the thoracic spine, the reaction for strengthening would be to feed the deformity. In other words, we would have weights in the patient's hands, and the patient then would be instructed to let the weights go down to their knee to increase the thoracic kyphosis. So the entire chain reaction of the body through the ankles and the hips and the thoracic spine and shoulders would say, whoa, we don't want that. We're going to decelerate that. We're going to turn on proprioceptors, and now we're going to return through what we call the concentric production of force after the eccentric load that will then decrease the thoracic kyphosis. So the loading of the curve has to be something that feeds the curve in all three planes of motion. That's another big asterisk. We can't just pick on one plane because we're going to still have the same path of least resistance bailout phenomenon. So this is a hard one, at least for me to try to describe even in my own brain here. But again, when you go through the videos, let's say we have that same C curve. I'm laterally flexed to the left, top down. My concavity's on the left side. My convexity's on the right side. My posterior rib hump's on the right side. What I'll say is I have a weight I'm going to put in my left hand or right hand. And I'm going to have this weight, and I'm going to hold it overhead, and I'm going to let it come down past my shoulder, and then I'm going to explode it up. So I'm going to load and explode in what we call a shoulder press. And the question is, which hand, if I'm attacking the frontal plane curve, would I put the weight in? Well, if you put it in the left hand and you now let the weight load you, it's going to load you into even more lateral flexion to the left. It's going to increase that frontal plane curve. That's what we want, though. A lot of people will say, well, if I put it in the right and that weight holds you down, it's going to correct the curve. No, what that's going to do, it's going to stimulate proprioceptively exactly the opposite of what we want. And when we see a lot of the table exercises we were taught in physical therapy school for scoliosis one-dimensionally, we all of a sudden not only get embarrassed, but our heart sinks because we quickly realize that a lot of the exercises we've been taught to do in a neurophysiological, neuromuscular skeletal way increase the curve. At the same time that we would then load that frontal plane from the top down, we would load the transverse plane. So now we have this long bungee cord at shoulder height, and we would say, so where do I want to hook the bungee cord in order to facilitate the reaction I want? So I have a handle in my right hand. I still have that weight in my left hand. And so the handle, I want the cord to pull me to the right to make the curve worse. So literally, if you saw me with this bungee cord and I just relaxed and I let it pull me to the right, rotate right, and I just let the weight down, I relax and I just let the weight come down on my left hand, you would see that my curve got worse. I have more lateral flexion to the left from the free weight, more rotation to the right with the bungee cord, but that's what I want. I want to feed the deformity. And again, I have to do this only after I do the mobility exercises to create that new path. Now, that third plane of motion, the sagittal plane, we let the free weight do that as well, where we actually bring the weight down and forward, so it throws us into a little bit of kyphosis. So when I do the exercise, so to speak, I explode the weight up and back, which simply will take the weight up and back and a little bit to the right, which will instantaneously correct the curve with the concentric contraction. And at the same time, I will pull the bungee cord from my right hand, and I will do a right hand, right rotational pull, where a left rotational pull, where I'll pull over in front of my chest, where now I'm correcting the transverse plane curve in the thoracic spine. Now, hopefully that's somewhat confusing because we're listening to it on a podcast and trying to figure out this three-dimensional reaction. We do a lot of tweakology with that top-down, but then at the same time, if I have a C curve, I am going to do something with the feet that you'll see on the video. I have to change the height of the leg length with a book to facilitate the reaction of the pelvis, and then I have to create a lunge, a transverse plane lunge, to facilitate what I want the pelvis to do. And again, in the mobility sense of that, I want to go opposite. But for stability, I want to load the curve bottom up as well as top down. Now, if I have an S curve, logic would say, and we've had very good results with this, that we treat the top curve top down and the bottom curve bottom up. That way, again, the patient can't bail out. And again, we have to do it three-dimensionally. And because we're attacking all three planes of motion at once, and we're creating movement to stimulate the proprioceptors, to turn on the muscles, to facilitate the joint reaction. It's neuromuscular skeletal. Because we do mobility, then stability, and we add a big component of endurance to this with their exercises. It's three-dimensional that way. And because we're attacking it top down, bottom up, and right to left, and left to right, and forward to back, we have our bases covered, and we're giving that patient every opportunity to basically begin to correct the neurological and myofascial and skeletal responses of their body that created the scoliosis to begin with, to begin to correct the scoliosis by going against the three curves in mobility and feeding the three curves with stability, top down, bottom up, right, left, right, forward, and back, forward, with 4 points of attachment and 4 points of control at all times, so we can't bail out. So hopefully that's somewhat helpful, but again, that's why we're going to have the videos up there so you can take a peek at the videos and go through all 6 parts. We've broken them up, and it's broken up in a way that I think most movement professionals can kind of take a look at that and say, you know what, let's give this a shot. Let's see what we can do here to help out. One of our gift fellows, Ed Pageant, you'll see some of his videos as well on YouTube, does an amazing job. So when he took gift, he learned this approach to scoliosis, and it's become a passion of his, and he's done amazing things with patients, even documented significant improvements in their curves, and obviously significant improvements in their ability to live and enjoy life because of what he's done. We have a lot of our gift fellows out there who do that, and because of their understanding of the human body through the 40-week mentorship program of gift, they have this ability to really understand the truths of what's really going on, the strategies that emanate from the truths, and what the techniques look like. And sadly, the techniques look a lot different than what we were taught in school, simply because we didn't ask ourselves, so what's really potentially causing this? What's the truth? And how do we want to approach this? So Matthew, thank you for the opportunity to share this with you and stimulate some thought on the proper treatment of scoliosis.
Are you looking to reconcile differences and inconsistencies in your movement education? Do you desire to know more about how the body truly functions, how it truly moves? Are you treating and training causes or just the compensations? Do you want to be able to treat or train any and every patient or client effectively? Are you looking to rejuvenate your career, enhancing your passion and purpose? Do you want to share an experience with other passionate movement professionals? If you answered yes to any of these questions, maybe you should explore GIFT, Gray Institute for Functional Transformation. It could transform your career and transform your patients' and clients' lives. GIFT provides certification in functional manual reaction as part of the 40-week mentorship program, as well as being credentialed and recognized as a Fellow of Applied Functional Science. And FAFS has the knowledge, analytical ability, and hands-on manual skills necessary for the application and integration of the core content of the GIFT curriculum, thus strategically designating you as a member of a select group of practitioners synonymous with the highest standard of care in the functional analysis of human movement. GIFT is designed for all movement professionals, including but not limited to physical therapists, personal trainers, athletic trainers, strength coaches, occupational therapists, kinesiologists, chiropractors, medical physicians, physical therapy assistants, and occupational therapy assistants. Are you ready to invest in yourself and your career in order to better invest in your patients, clients, and athletes? Check out GIFT at the Gray Institute website at www.grayinstitute.com and click on Mentorship at the top.
Doug Gray is the president of Gray Institute and the director of GIFT. Doug has a unique history with the movement industry as he is the youngest son of Dr. Gary Gray. His experiences and expertise have allowed him to enjoy multiple roles at Gray Institute. His world lights up when there is mention of his wife Valerie, his son Zion Wynn, or his daughter Lawson. Let's join Doug as he talks about continuing education.
All right, Gray Institute podcast listeners, this is Doug Gray, and per usual, I have yet another treat for you. And the reason I know it's a treat is because it's a treat for me to talk to people in general, especially those applied functional scientists that are out there just doing absolutely amazing things. And the person that I get the privilege of interviewing is no different. And it's a friend of mine, but also a colleague. And he has quite the story to tell. He's very captivating. But what you're going to find out is he is very passionate about movement. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce you all to Jason Hamera. Jason, thanks so much for being on the Gray Institute podcast.
Dougie, really appreciate it. And what a welcome. I wish my wife was in here. I don't think I've ever been called a treat before. So we're going to put that down in the record books as a first-timer there. And I know you just made my day. So hopefully everyone listening gets to enjoy that right there along with me.
Well, great. Well, isn't that the beauty of recording? It's mastered forever, so you'll be able to share that with her as much as possible. But, I just want to thank you for being on this podcast segment. Per usual, I like to interview people with a little bit more of a fluid Q&A. I really want our listeners just to hear more about Jason Hamera, hear more about your journey, hear more about what you're up to, and hear more about how they can find out more on what you're doing. So I'm going to kick it off and really give you the floor, and it's kind of an open-ended statement that kind of doubles as a question, but explain to our listeners your journey.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for that prep setup right there. So my journey with AFS actually started back in 2014. At that time, I was actually my 8th year in the health and fitness industry. I was a personal trainer, fitness manager, ran my own Taekwondo studio on the Upper West Side of New York. And at the time, I had always been kind of searching and seeking for more. So right around my first year of post-bac work, going back to become a physical therapist, I was kind of in this very suggestive state of what to do next. I know I wanted to help people. I know I wanted to get more into the science nerdy end of human movement, and the only path I had seen at the time was physical therapy. So it was around that time that fate kind of intervened, and I came across another GIFT fellow, a guy by the name of Justin Gelband, where I started working at his boutique fitness studio in New York City called Model Fit back at the time. And it was this kind of interesting, intriguing blended fusion of small micro movements paired with different angles that I had really kind of never seen before. And the fitness side of me became extremely excited and enticed, but the scientific side of me was kind of like, whoa. Putting people in some kind of interesting positions here. Like, what exactly are you doing? And he knew me at the time getting ready to be a physical therapist and get into PT school. And he's like, dude, whatever you do, in his, Justin Gelband way, dude, I'm telling you, man, whatever you do, don't do it. That was straight up verbatim out of his mouth. Don't do it until you talk to these guys, Gray Institute. And of course, I was kind of open-minded and into everything. So I was like, all right, yeah, I'll give him a call. And it was, I believe, I don't know if you remember, Doug, it was back right around November, December 2014. I definitely got you on the phone for a good 45, 50 minutes, and I'm sure it was the same thing y'all get from everyone, which is, hey, what is this AFS stuff? Hey, where's all the science? Hey, why does this work? Hey, I see some really, interesting things going on. And, I'm not going to lie, I don't remember what answers you gave me, but I do remember how you made me feel. And I think that was why I kind of say it was a stalled start, because it wasn't so much about the what, but it was the how and the why that really got me to kind of rechart my course. And I decided at that time that I was going to forego the rest of my post-bac journey and divert my attention away from an official degree in physical therapy, and I was going to check out this thing called GIFT and Gray Institute. So I enrolled for the 2015 class with the support of Justin and a few other classmates that we had at the time. And again, referring back to that stalled start, it took me a good 3 months to once again kind of say, what the heck am I doing here? And it wasn't until that van ride in Adrian in March of 2015 where things began to really kind of come together. And again, it was more about the people. It was more about the feeling. I remember when you first walked into the pizza party, I was like, yo, he's much bigger than he looked on TV. I was like, that guy is, and it was more than just your physical presence. It was I don't use spiritual terms, but it was more like the aura, the sense, the spirit that came in the room. And, your dad came in right behind you, Dr. Gary Gray. Dave Tiberio came bopping around. I think he might have been, smothered by you guys rolling in, but he all came in. I was like, wow, these guys that I've seen for 3 months telling me about, the principles and the truths of applied functional science, gravity, ground reaction, mass and momentum, and all the reasons that this stuff actually works. I'm like, these are the guys that birthed it. These are the guys that really took their vision. They did the work. They did the research, 40 years over worth of trial and error, observational experimentation to say, hey, this stuff works. And I realized at that point in 2015 that I was asking the wrong questions. I was asking for papers and words and studies and numbers and a whole bunch of different science, which, don't get me wrong, drive our industry forward and are incredibly valuable. But I was missing the fact that it's called human movement. And I think it was that human aspect that really just kind of turned my soul on to the power of AFS. And, I got to say, I've been humbled and honored to be invited back year after year to do what's called a PlayCoachMate Program. So for those of you guys listening, the GIFT program is a 40-week journey, which I completed in 2015. And I immediately couldn't get enough. And again, I appreciate the friend anecdote from earlier, but it was at the party, GG3, where I think it was over a shot of tequila, Doug. I don't know if that's able to be told, but I'm like, yo, how do I do this PCM thing? And you're like, cheers, brother.
Yep.
Hey, yo, 6 years later, here we go, getting ready to gear up for my 6th year going through the AFS journey. 5th year as a PCMer now, coming into 2020. And I couldn't be more honored and humbled that the realization of just what fate kind of throws your way and how the AFS thought process really helped me at least begin to ask better questions about the why, because the what's easy. You look at how the body moves. We're just trying to figure out what's going on and how's it working, but it's the why factor that really just got my journey going back in 2015. And I have to say it's a fueled kerosene, essentially, that just does not stop my curious desire from burning.
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you. Secondly, I think the listeners are like me. They're probably on their edge of their seat saying, all right, keep this guy talking, because he's just kind of unfolding a lot of maybe thoughts that are bouncing around in my own head, or he's giving me some ideas in which I can ponder and contemplate that's just going to make me better at what I do. And, I think it's great that you mentioned Justin Gelban. Of course, he's a dear friend of both of ours, and we think the world of him, and he's doing amazing things. And that's really kind of the amazing thing about the GIFT community is by far our best marketing arm, our fellows. And people say, man, I see what you know. I see what you can do. I want to know that. I want to do it, but I want to know it and do it in my own way. And that's really what the journey of GIFT really facilitates. And, even though we're all individuals, we're no different in that we all have our own story, our own journey. But our stories and journeys are what's different. And I think the more we can learn about each other's story and journey, the better off we're all going to be in understanding each other, but also drawing parallels that are going to equip us to not only make our life better, but ultimately what we're getting at and trying to make our patients' and clients' lives better. So just appreciate everything that you just stated. You know, going through GIFT in 2015, knowing was very much life-changing, and I appreciate you mentioning the conversation that we had prior to that, because a lot of people say, Doug, just give me the facts. Give me what the program's all about. And, you know, I can talk about the facts till I'm blue in the face. But really where the light bulbs go on is when they understand that they're going through the program with like-minded individuals, that they get to capitalize not only on the content but other people's experience and expertise. And it's really the community that's the gold, which is why, you know, the Jason Hameras of the world like to come back to PlayCoachMate, where they can continue to learn, but more importantly get to know the current year's GIFT community, but also start to facilitate and teach alongside the faculty and facilitators. And it's really just a win-win for everybody. So I'm going to try to pose another question, because I think the more I can be quiet in this conversation, the more you can talk, the better off we all are going to be. So you didn't mention quite yet your current journey, so I would love for you to let our listeners know your role within Procedos, and let us know what is Procedos. And I'm just going to kind of give you the floor to share as much facts as you would like about that amazing company and what you guys are all up to.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, you kind of brought up a really interesting thing that I think, you know, didn't really dawn on me until last year. And it kind of circles back into the amazing community that is the GIFT entity. And more importantly, what kind of draws everything in is their own individual passions, right? People can be passionate about a bunch of things, and most of the time people are passionate about many different things that not only conflict, but are going on simultaneously. And it's kind of one of those things now, especially kind of looking into, you know, pop social psychology, if you will, that, you know, the age of passion is kind of blending into the era of purpose. And the beauty of what the GIFT community does, the program, and also just in the people that are drawn to it, is that, you know, while the passions divert almost, you know, inevitably, there is one purpose, and that purpose is a transformative purpose, that everyone is in fact in it for other people. And I think that message it needs to be heard, that regardless of what your passion is, the one purpose that I think we all share is the service and the humility we have dedicating our lives to others. And it's with that dedication to purpose and that responsibility to continue to kind of seek and refine what we know is the truth, what we know is biomechanics, and everything that goes into human movement and treating the mind, body, and spirit. We have a responsibility to continue to kind of evolve, and we have a responsibility to attract those that make us better, that challenge us, that drive us to become more kindred spirits. And it's with that actually, you know, kind of birthed the journey that I'm now on, which is, as you mentioned, a company called Procedos, which, to give you guys a real quick visual, if you haven't experienced it, it's a mat that sits on the ground, and you can essentially imagine this 3D functional twister. And that's usually kind of brings out the novelty and gamification, but the power comes from Gray Institute, as Procedos is powered by Gray Institute. When you look at what the mat actually provides, it's a task and target driven environment that allows for not only the application of AFS principles, but also just unlimited exercise variability and novel creativity that we know is really starting to be kind of at the forefront of modern day health and wellness. Brain health training is coming big into the limelight now, but that doesn't devalue the fact that people like to be challenged, and they like to be really just given something new and creative. And Procedos allows us to have the ability to create things using the visual environment, using these 9 different dots and these 8 angulations that are on it, with the logic and the power of AFS to say, hey, we know your body needs this. It needs this mobility, but you also want to get toned. You want to get strong. So you need 3D functional strength. Oh, and by the end of the day, you want to be able to react to real world stimuli, because if we're looking at the art of function, well, sooner or later you have to go out and function. And while that concept is kind of up for debate and has many different definitions in the industry, we can all kind of agree that function is individually determined with task and targets. Like, hey, I would like to pick up this glass of water, therefore my function has to allow me to get certain joint motions and movements with certain neuromuscular controls, and I have to have certain sensory inputs. This is essentially what the Procedos mat allows us to do, is create a training program that allows clients to go through that functional needs, wants, and goals arc with the power of AFS, but at the same time brings it into the limelight of the personal trainer, the gym industry, the CrossFitter, the strength and conditioning coach, the athlete on the field, and it looks and feels and smells like strength training.
Right. Well, that I think is all spot on, and I think just by what you're saying is scratching the surface of really what Procedos is all about. And when it comes to applied functional science, we're big believers in conscious tasks and subconscious reactions, and to have a piece of equipment as powerful as the Procedos mat really allows those conscious tasks to be easier to facilitate even more better individualized subconscious reactions for our patients and clients. And of course, how we can get to that point is not just the brilliance of the piece of equipment, but the brilliance, of course, of the education behind that piece of equipment that really equips movement professionals with understanding and applying applied functional science in a very practical way is really what separates, Procedos from other organizations that might have some mats as well. And it's not, bashing those by any means, but it's validating the importance of authentic movement built into and infused into a great piece of equipment. You've been around us long enough to know that we have a saying at Gray Institute that there's a drastic difference between the imprisonment of the tool using you versus the empowerment of you using the tool. And so because this tool is so beneficial, the Procedos mat, if you could explain a little bit of the education that you offer behind Procedos as well, and kind of hone in on the 3 R's to just demonstrate where the rubber meets the road on where the education is applied through the Procedos mat, I think that would give our listeners even that much more positive intel to say, this might be something that I want to get personally. This might be something that I want to get for my patients and clients, because it really just makes my job that much easier.
Exactly, sure. And just kind of preface that a little bit more as well. I'm fortunate enough to be the director of education for the Procedos company as well. So all the education stuff, thankfully to kind of fulfill my passion of wanting to teach and speak and kind of inspire those to become curious about stepping up to that responsibility I spoke about when we talk about attaining more knowledge and asking the right questions to better our patients and clients. I fortunately had a pretty good hand in crafting what you alluded to, which is essentially our programming model, right? There's a lot of theories, there's a lot of principles in the industry. And then on the other side, there's a lot of techniques that don't have principles. And then there's a lot of everything kind of in between. So what we're trying to do kind of at Procedos is like you said, we're trying to get the rubber to meet the road. And we're trying to give a simplified version of a very complex system, thus the human body. And we're trying to systematize function in a way that makes it repeatable and easy for the client to follow. Well, the easy for the client to follow thing is already done, because the task and target environment of Procedos is just kind of a point and shoot approach, right? Step to this number and reach to that, or jump to here, or squat to here, or lunge to here. But the power really comes in when we look at the programming model that we've called R3, which R3 stands for restore, reinforce, and react. And if we're trying to talk about function, and we're naming Procedos a functional exercise system powered by the leaders in applied functional science, Gray Institute, we're basically saying that our ARC has 3 different components to it. The first part of the component when we look at function is, well, what does the body need? And from the Procedos perspective, well, the body needs mobility and stability. And this is essentially what makes up our restore function, is before you can do anything, and this rings true to trainers as well, is before we put 500 pounds on the bar and go for it, because trust me, I've done that before, it doesn't end well, is we got to warm up, right? We got to get the body ready. We got to make sure that everything's good to go. And while there's tons of systems for basically getting the body ready, we like to say, well, we want to restore what's called normalized motion throughout the system. Now, again, remembering we're trying to kind of simplify things, we took a look and we said, well, what does the body need? And we look at three major areas. We look at the foot and ankle complex, we look at the pelvis and the hips, and we look at the thoracic spine, which follows Gray Institute's Big Rocks. And we basically say, well, we want to restore normalized motion throughout these systems.
Right.
So we use Procedos to basically warm up the body in all three planes of motion by restoring this normalized motion, both the mobility component and the stability component, before we do anything. So that's what we teach right out the gate. Let's restore motion. Then we say, okay, well, we are treating a full client, and these clients usually come to personal trainers with the goal of weight loss or of strengthening or of performance enhancement or anything like that. But the one thing that we can almost guarantee every client comes to a personal trainer. You have any idea what it is, Doug? I'll put you on the spot. We didn't prep this answer, by the way, so this is true coming from him. What's the one thing that no client wants whatsoever?
They don't want pain.
They don't want pain. Ding, ding, ding. There we go. They don't want pain. So it's kind of one of those unspoken but really overlooked assumptive properties that
Right.
as personal trainers, as movement practitioners, right? You know, we usually think of pain, okay, physical therapist. But in an effort to try and elevate the responsibility of the health and fitness industry, we have to assume that any client who comes to us with the goal does not want to get injured. And normally the way we would have combat that is we would say, don't do this,
Right.
don't do that, knees over the toes, back straight, look here, do this. Basically take your body, which is a unique individual smattering of organic material, and fit it into this box. And I don't know about you, but anytime someone tries to stuff me into a box, I am not a happy camper. And I'm pretty sure we have evidence to say the body's not either. So at Procedos, we try and say, well, if we want to reinforce functional movement patterns or functional exercise patterns, we want to give the body a logical way to 3D itself safely, but also in a way that's going to promote resilience throughout the entire system. And that's what we look to do in our second portion, is we're applying the principle of three-dimensionality to say, okay, well, if you want to become stronger, you want to become quicker, you want to tone up and lose weight, you want to do it safely, what can we give your body that it wants in order to not only future-proof itself, but at the same time get the strength, the power, the toning? Well, that's where all of our functional exercises get 3D'd. So we're lunging anterior, posterior, same opposite side lateral, same opposite side rotational. And we begin to apply the CAPS principles, another certification from the Gray Institute that is simply enough located on the platform. So if you haven't seen a platform, basically everything I'm talking about in terms of observational essentials, or what makes up these foundational exercises, is all written out on the platform. So again, making the job simpler for the practitioner, everything that you need to learn is right there. You just have to be able to ask the right questions and create the process for reinforcing these functional exercise patterns. And then if we get to this third R, we're looking at, okay, well, in function, the body needs normalized motion. It wants to have functional resiliency in all three planes of motion. Well, now what's the ultimate goal? If function is goal-directed, well, the ultimate goal of any person when they walk out is to maintain the freeness of injury and obviously apply what they've learned in the gym. So we're basically saying, okay, well, this is where we get to have some fun, not only with the body, but with the mind, because most people nowadays, I believe, are kind of thinking about this 3.3 pound mass that's in the head. It's called the brain, and brain health is becoming one of those hot topics in the fitness world, because we're seeing rises of Alzheimer's, dementia, depression, anxiety, all of these cognitive neurodegenerative diseases. And we're noticing that exercise can have a positive impact. Nothing new. The cool part is we're beginning to learn that with specific adaptations and interventions of certain cognitive processes, we can begin to potentially manipulate the decrease in cognitive decline as more and more research comes out. And this is all based off selective attention type of training. And basically what that means is, if I'm looking at a Procedos mat, I got a bunch of numbers, I got a bunch of lines, I have to be laser focused in order to accomplish the goal. Yes, I'm creating a conscious task, like I'm lunging to a certain number, but I'm getting this powerful subconscious reaction through my body, which we know essentially is function. So our third and final R programming model is how do we create games, novelty, cognitive-derived exercise that not only allows the brain to improve, but also, once again, kind of locks in that very critical piece of function where we are using conscious tasks to create subconscious reaction while engaging the client in new and novel experiences, giving their brain a little bit of food, and therefore kind of completing that arc of needs, wants, goals, which is restoring, reinforcing, and reacting to the Procedos workout programming.
Wow. Well, that's there's a lot packed into that little explanation that you provided, which I think is going to give myself as well as our listeners a lot to think about. But you kind of just hit it head on that maybe pun intended there, but that we are truly mind, body, and we're also spirit. And when you think about the mind and the body when it comes to exercise, movement is one of those amazing things that people can benefit greatly for not only their minds but also their bodies. But it's kind of what you hinted at the beginning of this segment, and it's really kind of that emotional or spiritual side or the outcome of the environment that's being created. That's not only do we as individuals not want pain, which I'm glad I got that answer correct, but we also don't want to fail. And we don't want to be put at risk in which we may fail. And what's amazing is that with applied functional science and with Procedos, that we're able to use some tasks and targets to meet an individual where he or she is at to empower them so that they don't fail, but they're successful in the process. But what's great about it is it's that root word of functional, and it's fun the entire way and the entire time. So it's got the best of everything when it comes to applied functional science. Which really, of course, is why we wanted to put our name on it, because, of course, of the infusion behind it, but more importantly that, we believe in you, we believe in the people that, of course, that are pushing it forward, and we are just, more importantly, honored to be a part of this process with you. And so if you haven't checked out Procedos, I definitely encourage our listeners to do just that. Of course, they can look at it on our landing page through grayinstitute.com. But where else can our listeners learn more about Procedos and the mats and the education and the other things that you guys have in the works?
Absolutely. So, I think in this socially connected world, social media is kind of our first go-to at this point.
Right.
Procedos has a social media, Instagram, Facebook, very, very active on there, where you can see people all around the world using the product. And it's really interesting to see, once again, people have many different passions and styles of training, but Procedos is becoming one of those uniting things that allows us to direct our purpose in the industry. And we're currently in 22 different countries right now. So, checking out the Procedos Instagram, is going to show you people from all over the world and how they kind of apply it. And you're going to look at it and say, wow, they kind of look like me, kind of doing the same things. Well, yeah, because all of our bodies move in certain ways. But it's a great place to also see inspiration and begin to kind of pique that curiosity a little bit, to say, hey, I wonder why they're doing that, and I wonder if I do it, what it'll feel like. And then if I look up top and I see these different words and I change one of them, what's it going to do? So definitely the Procedos Instagram for sure. Second place is we do have a website, which is a constantly evolving content center where you can check out our educations, where there's some training programs that are being put up. We have our live 8-hour course, which is basically what we talked about, where we really dive deep into the R3 programming model, and we kind of coin this mantra, learning by doing. So it is a very experientially based workshop that allows you to dive deeper into the applications of Procedos. All that information is at www.procedos.com. And those are our main two options now. But of course, with our Powered by Gray Institute, like Doug said, it's on grayinstitute.com. And I'm, just by the focus of this podcast, Procedos is starting to branch out into more podcast areas as well. We were just recently featured on Chase Your Better podcast as well. So you can kind of hear some more information, conversation about how the Procedos product is slowly but very, rapidly making its way into the United States, as it is a Swedish product. So we're still kind of at the new edge of a uncharted horizon here. So we're really excited to see what the map looks like. We're ready to deal with the bumps in the road, but most importantly, we're ready to just keep kind of pushing the progress forward.
Well, great. Well, I appreciate all that information. I also, you mentioned that it's a Swedish product, and of course, company that's branching, of course, globally, which is very exciting. And I just want to give props and kudos to Jens, of course, who is spearheading that process on the Procedos side. As you know, we're just blessed to be partnered with him, and look forward to the growth of not only Procedos, but more importantly, the impact that Procedos can continue to have with not only the movement professionals, but of course also the further end users and the patients and clients and the athletes and the individuals that get to have fun on that mat in a very structured, methodical, and inspirational way. And so as we kind of come to a close here, Jason, what I want to do is I'm going to put you on the spot. You kind of know it's coming, but to put you on the spot by in 45 seconds or less, you have to equip me as well as our amazing listeners with just one of the biggest pearls of applied functional science that you can share to continue to empower our minds and to ultimately lead to some sort of application that we can put into practice. Go.
All right. So if you haven't figured it out already and you don't know me from the past, the biggest thing, the biggest why that applied functional science has helped me kind of understand and bring out is just the ability to remain open-minded and realize that what's in front of us is in front of us, but it's all about treating that mind, body, spirit, the tridox, and realizing that most importantly, it's that curiosity, it's that continued insatiable desire to want to drive forward, and remember that the people that are in front of you that you're serving are the whole reason, the whole purpose, and your why behind the what.
Okay, well, you nailed that. I didn't expect anything different, but very succinctly done. But that's one of those things that I think is going to just continue to resonate in all of our minds, that we definitely want to keep that person in mind. In fact, one of my buddies, he's our executive director of our nonprofit Free to Play. He's got a phrase, and he would say, "That'll preach." And so that'll definitely preach and continue to inspire. So, Jason, on behalf of myself, on behalf of Gray Institute, on behalf of our listeners, I just want to take this opportunity just to thank you for your time. I know you are a busy, busy bee. You're traveling all the time. But the fact that you would block out such a significant time to capture this podcast so that we can release it to the world is very humbling and appreciated on this end. And I really just appreciate you as a person and as a professional, as a colleague, and just the way that you go about your day to try to learn more, to inspire more. So very humbly from the Gray Institute side, we want to thank you.
Well, it's right back at you, Doug. Yeah, I can't go ahead and top that. We're definitely going to leave those words bounce around in people's head. But from my side as well, appreciate you, appreciate the Gray Institute, everything it's done for my life, and really can't wait to see what we as a community are capable of doing.
Well, I appreciate it, Jason. And thank you, listeners, for sticking through this, which is very easy to do when you have a guy like Jason talking. So appreciate your words, Jason. Appreciate your inspiration, and wish you well. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Our second question, again, comes from Matthew Haley in our twofer series here. And this is, on one hand, kind of a simpler question, but on the other hand, kind of has some depth to it. In 3DMAPS, is it appropriate to perform the analysis in mobility and stability separately and come up with a RSC, which means relative success code for each? Or is the RSC only valid when combined into most stability? Well, first of all, Matthew, you have a very good understanding of 3DMAPS. I can tell that you're certified in 3DMAPS. You've used it, you've gone through it, and you've helped a lot of people by understanding how their body moves. For those of us who haven't been introduced to 3DMAPS, 3DMAPS is the most authentic human movement screen because it looks at all 66 motions that make up all the vital human movements of the body, and these represent the three planes of motion of all the major joints that influence other joints. And we're able to do it with just 6 basic movements of mobility and 6 movements of stability. So as you learn those movements, where the first movement, the anterior chain, looks at our trunk and our hips and our legs and our shoulders through what we'd call a lot of extension. And the second movement, the posterior chain, looking at a lot of flexion going on. And then the same side lateral and opposite side lateral, looking at both sides of the frontal plane chains, and of course, the all-important transverse plane chains going same side rotational, opposite side rotational. We learn in 3DMAPS that you come up with a relative success code. So it's not a relative failure code. It's not what can't you do, it's what you can do. And that's based on the biomechanical understanding of the rule of 3D, and that is if you influence one plane of motion, you automatically influence the other two. Therefore, we can take advantage of that by saying if you're really good in this particular chain and not so good in that chain, the relative success code will start with success, and by going through the right progressions that are outlined in the certification, automatically the chains that you weren't so good in, mysteriously, not so mysterious, it's all biomechanics, it's not magic, get better. And that's because every movement is three-dimensional movement, but if we start with success and go to less success, then we have this ability to get to where we want to go very quickly through all three planes of motion and through the neuromuscular skeletal system, as we talked about again up in our first question in scoliosis. Now, the question was, do I need to aggregate the mobility and stability, or can I do them separately? Well, brilliantly, I love the idea of separate. So if I just went through the 6 mobilities, I could come up with a relative success code and then go to work. Start with the most successful and then work my way to least successful with the performance system, and you would get dramatic improvement in your patients and clients. I could also do just stability. I could say, okay, I appreciate what mobility is, but when I take away stability, I demand stability out of the body, then this is going to be a way that I can use a relative success code for just the stability aspect. Now, the certification teaches that we, many times, to get an overview of the patient and client, we combine the two. So we combine the mobility and stability in what Matthew properly calls most stability, and come up with a relative success code for that. Now, what's even more exciting, Matthew, is I can even take just a couple of the mobilities. Let's say I want to do the anterior chain, same side lateral, same side rotational, just those 3, and I can come up with a relative success code just with those 3 mobility movements. I can do the same thing with any of the stability movements. I might say, well, I'm going to really look at what that posterior hip's doing, so I'm going to go my posterior chain, stability, I'm going to go my opposite side lateral chain, stability, and I'm going to go my opposite side rotational stability, because that really turns on the posterior lateral glute muscles, and it'll give me a great idea what they're able to do in all 3 planes of motion. I can come up with a relative success code saying, well, your best one was the frontal plane, opposite side lateral. Your next best was the transverse plane, opposite side rotational. And your least best was your posterior chain. And I'd go to work, and I'd start with my most successful, my frontal plane, and just working on the frontal plane, and then going to the transverse plane. Immediately when we go to the sagittal plane, that posterior chain, we all of a sudden see that, wow, that one got better, and we didn't even work on that one. That's because that was the least successful in this example, but because of the law of 3D, that all of a sudden us taking the successful chains create success in the other chains, even if I take 3, in this case, stabilities. The other exciting thing about the relative success code is I can use it for any of the performance systems. So as you know, Matthew, all the performance systems have a performance system relative to the planes of motion or to the chains of motion that I can use. So for example, I might say I'm going to do mobility pivots. And I'm going to go sagittal plane pivots, frontal plane pivots, and transverse plane pivots. So I take somebody through mobility, sagittal plane pivots. So I'm doing my anterior lunge with my bilateral posterior overhead arm swing. And then I take my foot back in my posterior lunge, and I take my hands down and back with my bilateral hand posterior ankle arm swing. And I go back and forth in mobility, and I say, okay, I see what I got there, with the right foot being a driver. I then do the left foot as a driver. Then I go to my frontal plane pivots, where I go same side lateral to opposite side lateral with the proper hand motions that facilitate the reaction we want. And then I do my transverse plane. And I quickly see that, wow, I can do a relative success code with my pivot matrix, with 3DMAPS. And in this case, let's say my transverse plane was the best, and then my sagittal plane was the next best, and then my frontal plane was the least best. Well, again, we start with that transverse plane and start tweaking that, as the performance series will show us, and immediately going through the transverse plane, creating different tweaks, create a better frontal plane pivot, and then a better sagittal plane pivot. So it's getting to where we want to go a lot quicker, and using the science of biomechanics and the magic and the biomechanical magic of the rule of 3D in order to get there. So I can use any of my performance movements and develop a relative success code. Again, I don't have to use all 6. I can pare it down to a couple at a time to really give me an idea where I want to go and how I want to get there. So incredible question, Matthew. I really want to share my admiration of you just from your 2 brilliant questions, and just thank you for taking the time to reach out to us and asking us the questions and giving us an opportunity to share with you our thoughts and ideas, and hopefully it stimulates more thoughts and ideas, not only from you, Matthew, but from many of our other listeners with this podcast. Once again, this is the Gray Institute podcast. This is Gary Gray sharing with you, hoping and trusting and literally praying that you all have a incredible Thanksgiving season, and that you just take just a pinch of time to sit back and to have a big grin on your face and a big grin in your mind and a big grin on your heart with all the things that we've been blessed with, and just the opportunity and privilege that others give us to share what's in our minds, what's in our hands, what's in our hearts with others, to enhance their ability to move and to ultimately enhance their quality of life and enhance their ability just to thoroughly enjoy life and to bless others. So continue to bless each other, continue to uplift each other, continue to encourage each other, and keep the questions coming. We really appreciate them. Thanks so much.
This is Barb. Thanks for joining us here on the Gray Institute podcast. At Gray Institute, our goal is to do one thing the best we can, and that is to help you become the go-to movement professional. If you have questions for future podcasts or questions about anything Gray Institute offers, including education, live or online specializations, or mentorship, please email us at info@grayinstitute.com. If we use your question on air, we'll send you some cool stuff. Be sure to look for our next podcast coming soon. Have a great day.